Thanks for tuning in to the 5th season of the Halfling and the Spaceman, Journeys in Active Fandom. We're having great conversations with people that have turned their love of fandom into something creative. We are fans talking to fans.
And today we are excited to be talking with a game RPG enthusiast who has been working and developing his own game setting for 30 years. The company that he's founded will soon be releasing their Kickstarter to produce and ship the setting and campaign materials. Welcome, Dave Hadden.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thanks for being here and taking the time to join us. Let's go ahead and get started with you just telling us a little bit about yourself and your background.
I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started 4 or 5 companies in different spaces. The first one was actually a historic restoration company, restoring ancient buildings and temples, and then did that on a couple of different continents, got to travel around quite a bit doing that work, and that kind of really engendered a fascination for ancient building techniques and kind of regal monumental stone buildings. You know, it's a big passion of mine. Then that was a series of software companies, mostly that use immersive simulations to train healthcare practitioners. And I kind of think of it as sort of like role-playing, you know, where you're the patients, the role-play bit, and then having this sort of realistic experience for the physicians, you know. And so that's been the last 20 years or so doing that. Then on top of that, like I've traveled a lot just for work and for other reasons. I played in a Peruvian flute band, and for 3 years we traveled around the world to like 55 different countries playing South American Peruvian folkloric music. And between that and like sailing and all the medical training stuff that I've been my primary occupation, I've been to like 75 countries, including Egypt, which is the setting for our campaign. And that entire time I've been, sort of off and on developing my own homebrew and running it, over the decades. I started it in high school, and finally, 3 years ago or thereabouts, made the decision to try and publish it formally, and so started Orthane to do that.
You talk about an impressive background. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
That is what I call street cred.
Seriously.
College dropout.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
I am a college dropout.
Well, I mean, but then you're going to make the rest of us look bad. The ones who actually, got the degree, and now we're older podcasters.
I don't think anybody would have hired me, so that's why I kept having to start my own companies.
Did you keep the same gaming group? Have you kept the same gaming group? No, there's no way you could keep the same group all the way. No.
Oh, no. I've had, not the same group. So the Kingdom of Keshanar is the setting that, Orthane is the planet and the company. And then Keshanar is like the country that we're actually releasing our first, ancient Egyptian themed campaign setting on. I had the idea for that in high school, started developing homebrew in high school. It's when I discovered Dungeons & Dragons like 43 years ago or whatever, dating myself here also. And so off and on, I've been just developing that as my homebrew ever since. And so I've run it probably 5 times in recent years. Over the last decade, I've run it with 4 different groups in both 5e and also with the RuneQuest role-playing system, which I think they call a universal role-playing system or something now, that Chaosium produces, which is very different, but I love it a lot. It's a really good system. And I've run 4 play tests that were 2 years long, level 1 through 20, with 4 different groups. So it's been pretty heavily play tested. And after all of that, I was like, okay, there's something here. People really like it. I love doing it, and the ancient Egyptian theme is popular, and it's very iconic in our culture, and kind of just summons mystery and intrigue. And made the commitment 3 years ago to actually publish it, and it's been a journey, let me tell you.
Dave, we're talking about going back to your origins for 43 years. Back in the day when you were growing up, did everybody consider you to be a nerd or a geek? And what kind of nerdy and geeky things were you into way back then?
We didn't. I spent the grades 7 through 12 in a boys boarding school in Canada, which is an English style boys boarding school. And actually it's a lot like Hogwarts. In fact, if you look at the eating hall that we ate in, it's actually identical to the Hogwarts one, because ours is built after the Oxford one, and the Oxford one's where they film Hogwarts stuff. And that's really what Hogwarts is all about. It's like it's a private boys boarding school experience, but with magic and monsters. So I got to experience that exact thing, like we had to wear the robes and the suit and play cricket, which is Quidditch, and like it was that kind of whole experience. But of course, no monsters, no fake creatures, no magic, until I discovered Dungeons and Dragons, and then that introduced those missing elements into that whole experience, which is interesting. But we really didn't have this geek concept back then. It just wasn't something that it wasn't a choice insult that you would level at people. But I certainly played D&D. When I first discovered it, it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is more than a game. It's just it's an experience. And I also programmed on the first personal computers that came out. That was a Commodore Amiga 2001 in like 1978 or something. And I remember the first thing I did with it, one of the first things I did with it was teach it to translate Latin so I could cheat on my Latin homework. That turned out to be the first English to Latin translation program ever on a personal computing system. But I had no idea that I'd done that. I just did it so I could cheat on my homework. I fessed up to my teacher and he loved it. So he gave me a good grade anyway.
You've hinted just a little bit at your educational background, but kind of delve into that a little more, because you said you were a college dropout. So what happened there?
My uncle was an incredibly generous and amazing person. My father died when I was very young, but then he took me out of the worst high school system in North America, which was terrible. Like, we didn't even go to the classes, we just ran around the hallways. It was crazy. And into like one of the best schools in North America, which is Trinity College School, which is this boarding school experience in Canada, not far from where he lived. And that was like an incredible education. Like it was very difficult for me because I was coming, again, like ill prepared, coming out of the worst high school and one of the worst high schools in the country, to that experience, incredible experience, with tiny class sizes and really dedicated teachers, and just was incredible. And then after that, I graduated and, started college at Penn State, and I really didn't quite measure up to that experience. Like I didn't have the money to go in to just like go to like a Ivy League school or something and, do like the big college experience. And really, so it was a function of like not having to work at the same time, not having enough money to really just do it, or we didn't have the concept of taking incredible student debt back then, fortunately, I guess.
Yeah.
And so then I wound up going to Israel, actually, and spending 3 years in Israel doing kind of like voluntary service in Haifa, Israel, which wound up becoming the building restoration kind of endeavor, restoring ancient masonry buildings.
How long did it take for you to decide that I love this, but that you wanted to take this world that you've been playing in and turn it into a published game and share it with the world?
40 years. 40
years, the whole time.
The whole time, yeah. I gave up. I didn't play at all, really, for probably, I don't know, 10 or 15 years in the middle of that whole thing, because I was either traveling and couldn't, or just too busy with my startups. Startups are all consuming. Like it's kind of like a 7-day-a-week, 10-hour-a-day thing, But then with 5e, I got back into it. When 5e came out, a friend of mine approached me and said, "Hey, have you checked out 5e?" And I'm like, "No." And he said, "You really should. It's a good system. And by the way, at the comic book store, they do these adventure leagues games. You and I should go and play." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, why not?" And so I did. And that was it. I wound up taking over games, actually. And there was 2 tables there, and I started DMing, and then within like 3 or 4 or 5 months, there was like 20 tables, and it was just really taken off. Me and a couple other people just sort of took it over and really put a lot of effort and energy into it. And I loved 5e. It's so easy. The rule system is easy and elegant at the same time, and it fits with the mythos and the kind of lore of the campaign setting that I'm building, which is this concept of like the separation between arcane and divine magic is sort of a critical mechanical plot point. So that was it. So then I some of those folks that I met at Adventurers League, I wound up running a home game for them, because the AL games are really, they're all one shots, right? So I would just tell like, let's run a real campaign, right? So I resurrected my old campaign, and then that's the one that was years ago. So that was probably 8 years ago. And so since then I've run it like 4 times.
That's awesome. So when do you expect your Kickstarter to ship?
The Kickstarter funds are going to like offset our investment a little, and also help pay for like the printing and everything, which is all incredibly expensive. But the team is committed to developing the content regardless of when the Kickstarter launches.
Awesome. That is awesome.
That is. Well, so we've started getting into this a little bit, but let's go ahead and really talk more the specifics about what Orthane Productions is.
It's just a shell company to produce this. We have one product. It's the Kingdom of Keshanar. It's the setting and the campaign, and that's it. That's the whole product. We will do other things later. Like there's already other adventures we could, like, if it takes off, people really like it, and they like our team and our style and everything, then there are other countries on that world that are interesting places to explore. We already got some ideas around that. But Orthane Productions is a company to build, campaign settings and adventures for places on Orthane, this fantasy world, and that's what it is, and that's our complete commitment. Like, we're not going to be making products and tchotchkes and selling them or anything. It's dedicated to just that.
I really wish that this had been around about 15 years ago, because about 15 years ago, I was playing around with some colleagues at work. So every Thursday, we would get together during lunch, and we would run GURPS Combat. And the idea is that I would set a stage, and then we would do a combat related, and then I just fill in the story in between. And it was a pulp adventure game that was going to go into the Egyptian afterlife. When we finally decided it wasn't going to work, because we all kept getting paged during lunch, we just sort of gave up on it. So we got to having a big battle at the Tomb of Thoth, and that was it. But Egyptian stuff is just way cool.
Yeah, and we're certainly not the first people to do this. In fact, my inspiration for all of it was the first module that I ever purchased and ran as a module, which was the Desert of Desolation by Tracy and Laura Hickman. It was actually the kind of started my love affair with ancient Egypt. I mean, everybody's fascinated by it because, the only wonder of the 7 wonders of the world that's still standing is the Great Pyramid of Giza, so everybody knows of it, and it's so iconic and mysterious and intriguing, and mummies and pharaohs and all of it, right?
Right.
But it's amazing how surface level our knowledge of it really is, and how much more there is to know about it, and how interesting that stuff is. But what we're trying to do, just to differentiate ourselves, and also to kind of like do it justice, is really take a much deeper dive. So like when you play in Keshanar, like the culture that you experience, the sayings, the buildings, the theology, just all that kind of really nitty gritty stuff is inspired directly from ancient Egyptian culture. And it's just incredible how when we really dove in really deeply into ancient Egyptian culture and history, at least what we know of it, right? Because there's nobody around to tell us anymore, and it's all just from the archaeological record, how much great material there was in there to just really flesh this world out. And so it's not, you're not playing in ancient Egypt. It's a world that's an analog of ancient Egypt, it's what it would have been like if the monsters, the magic, and the gods were real. That's the concept.
How did you go about recruiting the talent to work on this massive project?
Yeah, it's all through Upwork. So some of the folks that are involved are friends of mine that have played in the campaign a couple of times, once or at least once or twice. Like a couple of them actually went through twice, and that's just a couple of them. But really, almost all of them are I found through Upwork. One of them. So it's either a friend or Upwork, but Upwork is a lot of it. And I wasn't deeply involved in the community. Like I went to my first con a year ago. Like I've been playing forever.
Really?
Yeah, no, I never really got.
Wow.
I just ran games. I ran games for my friends. That's what I did. But I never really, I did that heavily. was really committed to it, but I never went to a con. It just wasn't something I did. I really didn't have the time, actually, because when you're running, like I said, I've been an entrepreneur for so long, and you're just scrabbling to make ends meet all the time, but then now, so I was like, okay, well, now I need to announce that I'm doing this and kind of like start to get out into the community. And the first one I ever went to was GaryCon. Happened to be on the 50th anniversary of GaryCon last March, and when they did their first kind of Founders and Legends, pre-conference thing, which is incredible. I sat down at the table, and so I didn't really know all the people, like the superstars either, right? So I was sort of a duck out of water kind of thing. But I did know Mike Merrills, and Mike Merrills was sitting at the table. I'm like, wow, is he just here to like make an announcement or something? Like, what's I don't understand what's the deal. I was like, no, he's your DM. I'm like, what? This is the first con game I'm ever running. It's like the guy who developed, the 4th and 5th editions of Dungeons and Dragons, and Legend. He's my DM. It's all downhill from here, Yeah, it was an incredible experience.
So you guys going to be at what is it, Mythic Con in Charlotte?
I'll be in Egypt.
I love the guys at Mythic, but if I had a choice between being in Egypt and being in Charlotte, I think I'd pick Egypt.
Egypt trumps.
The Egypt trumps.
Yeah, we were going back with some of our team. I wanted to go back, and I hadn't been to Egypt in 20 years, and so it's time to go back and really take the time. So we're going for 2 weeks and kind of going to visiting all the archaeological sites with Egyptologists, and we're going to be also creating digital shorts every day and uploading them from.
Okay, so you guys are heading all in on promotions.
All in, yeah. It's the only way to go, because, like I said, I didn't have any contacts in the industry. I'm just a nobody, right? So I'm coming out of absolutely nowhere to do this thing, and that's difficult. So most of the people that have successful Kickstarters or have successful launches of any kind, regardless of what they're using to do it, have followings already. They've been at it for a long time. So we have to invest in promotion to really get it out there. Otherwise, it's a customer acquisition cost. To use a real nerdy industry term. And you got to spend the money to get it in front of the customers. And that's my goal with this, is not necessarily to make money. I want to break even at least, right? That's important. But my goal is that they get taken care of. So we have to make money to do that. And so, and for us, you got to spend money to make money. So Kickstarters are expensive actually to run, to do well and to have a chance.
So, Dave, what has been the most challenging thing about designing this really expansive setting?
Every single piece of it is so much more work and complexity than I imagined.
Mm-hmm.
It's like drink in the ocean, and I thought I've run this thing 4 times for 8 years, 8 to 10 years. I've got all these notes. I've got 600 pages of notes. It'll be easy to publish this. Yeah, right. And then I've had to write it and rewrite it so many times, so you write a piece, you play test it, it's like, nope, that doesn't work. Got to redo it all again. And I've gone through that process 3 or 4 times with the manuscript, and we're still not finished with it, but now we're kind of making progress. And then Egypt was like this bottomless pit of just incredible information that I never realized. People don't realize that the Egyptians invented like so many things, like clocks.
Mm-hmm.
The sundial was an Egyptian invention, and then water clocks, because you can't use a sundial at night or bad weather. So they invented the water clock, which is the first mechanical time keeping system. Like, we're on a 365-day calendar year because that was the Egyptian calendar, not Gregorian. He put in some changes to it, but it's an Egyptian calendar. And the whole concept of equality of men and women, ancient Egypt, the women not only had the vote, they could be pharaoh, they could have play positions of authority over men, and property passed through the female line. Women in this country didn't get the vote, for 5,000 years after that, right? So they're just ahead of us in so many ways. And I think we like to look at ancient cultures and say, oh, they couldn't have built those pyramids, aliens did it. It's like, no, they did it. No, they built it, and we're learning more about how they did all these things. They did it with copper tools and without the wheel. And they did it by being creative. And so that part, Egypt is incredibly surprising piece, like diving past all the tropes and more deeply into the culture and their technology and trying to understand it. And, and lately there's been this sort of renaissance of like non-archaeologists, non-Egyptologists that are like engineers, right? That are going to look at all this stuff and saying, whoa, hold on a second. This isn't right. Like geologists, like the geologist that went to the Sphinx and said, this thing's way older than you say it is, because these erosion patterns are water. Mm-hmm. And this place didn't have water at the time you said this was built. So it could be twice as old as you think, right? And so like all these other like sciences are kind of getting involved. And so like it's just that and so I'm making my journey into it at the same time. It's fascinating. Yeah, so like that's all of it has been complicated. Like, figuring out the consumer marketing component is just incredibly eye-opening too. Like they said, I've never done it. So it's been, like I'm technically retired now, this was sort of my passion project business. I sold my last company and that gave me the time to do this full time. And, but I would never work so hard in my life.
What has been your biggest surprise thus far?
I would say the community has been the biggest and most pleasant surprise, right, of this whole thing, and how willing everybody is to provide their time and advice. The con fam, is great. Mm-hmm. And like people are just, and also the enthusiasm that is being greeted with. Like we're starting to put out ads, for the Kickstarter, the kind of pre-launch for the Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. And Facebook there's comment, we get to comment on them because they're on Facebook, so people comment and we answer every single comment and respond to every single email. And they're so overwhelmingly positive about Egypt and wanting a really immersive, dedicated, comprehensive setting like this, because there's been a lot of great stuff, but it's all sort of like a taste, so that has been overwhelming. And we've been heart-filled with gratitude seeing all these players and DMs say, where's this been my whole life? I can't wait to do it. And that's been really, incredibly heartwarming. Because like I said, coming at it as an indie company that has no contacts and knows nobody, right? And doesn't have a following, and that's been kind of tough, right? We're starting from a dead halt, all that inertia we have to overcome, and the community has been super helpful and supportive.
Dave, one of the questions we tend to ask mostly authors is, what makes a good story? But as a tabletop role-playing game developer, you don't really create a story unless your setting is got this overarching White Wolf style story arc. Mm-hmm. So how do you build a framework within your game so that the game master and the players can tell great stories together?
That is an incredible question. And that is a style of writing and structure that is difficult to develop. I had to learn that because, when I was homebrewing, I would just make some rough notes, build a map, and just wing it all, But to turn this into something that other people can run, I realized like early on, my earlier manuscripts, they were too expository, and I started writing the first manuscript probably 3 years ago or something. And there was too much just expository text, and the players want to play it, right? And so they don't want to sit there and listen to a lecture about this or that. And so everything has to be in 30 seconds. They got 30 seconds to do some kind of expository explanation about this temple or this cult or this whatever. You have to get creative about how you deliver all this lore to the party. You have to let them uncover it, and based on decisions that they make and questions that they ask and places that they go. And you have to make them responsible for like the unveiling of all this information. That was a big thing for us, is like, we want to make it easy for the DMs to run it too. So we don't want you to have to like, have so much content that it's difficult. Like we're doing things like we're color coding the edges of the pages in the book so you can quickly jump to the various sections of the city. So one thing that's different about our campaign is it all happens in one city. Whereas usually, like not in every case, but most campaigns, you'll find that people you move the players along. And so with Keshanar, the city of Keshanar, we have it's harder to get to, like, because they could do anything. They could go anywhere. I don't know where they're going to go, right? I give them plot hooks and clues, but they just might wind up randomly go to the Temple of Hathor, you know? Well, it better be ready. You know, I mean, I can probably wing it, but I don't want to force my DMs that are running this to wing it. So you've got to be able to flip over to the Temple of Hathor, and here's the NPC standing in front, and here's the things they know about, here's the gossip. You know, you got to have that stuff done. Getting those mechanics right was challenging, right? And one innovation that we brought to all of that is we actually built the entire city in Unreal Engine, which you guys saw. Like, instead of doing just a plain 2D map, which we also have giant 2D maps, but all the BTT assets and everything, but we actually built the entire city in the 3D modeling tool so that you can run around in it. So, and it's not a game because there's nothing to do there except walk up to the buildings and click on them and get information about them. But it still took 3 years to build it. And you know, one of my illustrators was an architect, and so like I actually technically had an architect, you know, designing these buildings. And then we would hand that to the 3D development team, and then they would build it in Blender and then import it into the Unreal Engine. And so now we have this amazing tool. This is a unique, I think, a novel thing that we've developed, so that between games, the players can run around in the city itself and like do some of their own exploration. Like, I want to go see what the Temple of Isis looks like. Pull up the map, walk over there, or fly over there. You know, so then having all that detail is really important. The gods, the politics, the NPCs, the plot hooks, and all that. And then having that kind of moral complexity is really important, so that to make those difficult decisions, you know, like in life, right? And that's one of the things I've always loved about D&D. Like my mother would ask me, you know, tell me about this game. What's it like? What are the rules? I'm like, it's life. It's just like life. You just,
it's life,
there are no
but
rules.
with dragons and rogues.
You make decisions. Yeah, make decisions and stuff happens, you know? It's just like life. Or interesting. Sometimes.
All right, well, Halfling, why don't you bring us on home?
So now we come to the really important part, which is tell everybody where they can find out about Orthane Productions, the World of Keshanar, and the Kickstarter.
Absolutely. Everything's on our website. It's just keshanar.com, Keshanar, which is Kesh and Anar, which means bright land. And yeah, so we have like the Kickstarter is linked in there. The Kickstarter is launch.keshanar.com. And then but our YouTube channel and our Facebook page, our Facebook group and everything, it's all kind of like, you know, you can go to the website, you can find it pretty easily. It's all linked in there.
Okay.
All right.
Orthane has its own website too, but all it does is say, "Hey, go to Keshanar." That's not a lot to say here.
All right, and we want to also thank our listeners for tuning in today, and we hope that you've enjoyed and perhaps become inspired by today's guest, Dave Hadden. We want to give you a huge thank you once again for joining us, and this is the Spaceman for the Halfling and the Spaceman podcast. Over and out.